Welcome to the Healing My Parts podcast, a podcast dedicated to educating and raising awareness about dissociative identity disorder, also known as DID. We are your hosts, the system behind Healing My Parts, which also includes parts that function as a therapist and leader in a mental health niche space. We'll be sharing tips and tools that have helped us and many others, while also sharing insights from our own journey of living with the condition. We'll also be hosting guests for conversations to help educate, dispel myths, and most especially help those living with dissociative identities and professionals who treat the condition. Thank you so much for tuning in. And now, let's get healing. Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to have you listen in today to what we are calling the Trauma-Wise Careers and Plural Leadership, a conversation with Cyndi Bennett. And we are excited to introduce Cyndi, their system, and their incredible work. And so first, welcome, Cyndi and all. And I wonder if you could start by just talking about what you'd most like listeners to know about you.
Hey, Monica, thanks so much. I appreciate that. In my day job, I work for a very large global financial corporation. But in my side gig, I am a trauma-informed career coach. And I have Cyndi Bennett Consulting has the Resilient Career Academy, and I work specifically with trauma survivors on their careers because we spend so much time, 90,000 hours on average, at work. And I've been reading or in the literature, or even if you do a Google search online, if you do a Google search online like CPTSD and work, my stuff will come up. Nobody else is talking about it. And so really it shows up in big ways, in detrimental ways in the workplace. And so that's my passion and my purpose. I'm so excited to be here with you and to really, for the first time ever, kind of unveil my system, because I haven't ever shared it with anybody publicly before. So you've been like an inspiration to me, being able to connect with you and hearing how you went public with your story. And man, it was so inspiring to me. And I was like, she can do that. I can do that too. And it might be time now, right? So my system is called Orchestrated Harmony. I think at first it was kind of like a wish because it was anything but orchestrated and harmonious, not at all. But that's what our goal is, at any rate, is orchestrated harmony. One thing I do appreciate is I have always appreciated individuality in people, to understanding how each person works and how each part works, because we're all different, how we can all come together to do some really wonderful things together. And that's sort of how I approach my system. And so it's just getting comfortable in my DID skin enough to come out and to say, okay, here we are. And, it gives us the opportunity to meet more people that are experiencing the same things. And because I work with trauma survivors exclusively, there is a really big possibility that we're going to have people with DID. Like it just is. I think I heard on one of your podcasts, you talking about it's as prevalent as someone who has a natural redhead. Well, in my family, we've got lots.
In some of the studies, yeah. Statistically, it will be impossible for you to not have systems that you're working with when you look at all of the stats. So anywhere from, most of the studies are showing 1.1 to 1.5% of the global population, upwards of 3%, which is the equivalence of folks who have red hair. But when you're looking across diagnostic categories, OSDD 1A and 1B and DID especially together is very prevalent, equivalent to somewhere between anxiety and depressive disorder, which is a lot.
It is a lot.
Our hope for you all is that this sort of unveiling of yourselves feels affirming and freeing, because there's something I feel that's really beautiful about being able to just really show up authentically rather than having to pretend you're something or someone you're not across the board. And I think when we hit this particular phase for both of us in our careers, that we've established what we're able to do professionally. So there is no question about whether or not we can function with plurality or not, right? We've been doing that for decades. So the risk there is minimal, I think. There's relative risk for sure, but it's minimal.
Yeah. And what's interesting is we've just started, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago now in therapy on this journey with our system. And I've got a new therapist and all the things. And so I was a year and a half in denial after I learned that I had DID. And I was like, nope, nope. And that's part of it, right? I get it. But also we're in a journey in the past 3 or 4 months and learning how to operate as a system. And to be honest, it's been super fun. I'm just learning. My therapist is teaching us a whole bunch of tricks, which we love and use like all the time. So I've recognized in the last 4 months that we actually have a place where we don't have to cover up. We don't have to hide. Like we can just decompress and not cover up. We've done that for 58 years. And we finally found a place where we didn't have to do that. And it felt wonderful, So I feel like, oh, okay. And everything is okay. It just is. And we're like, sometimes we may not understand why a specific part does a specific thing, but, it's just part of I don't know, we have a lot of fun in my system most of the time. At least we try.
One of the things that you mentioned was I was in denial for a year and a half, which I'm thinking that's actually pretty quick to come out of it in some respects. There are those of us who like to go back into it for, 2 decades. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you all navigated coming out of denial to be either more accepting or how you even discovered that you're plural and coming to accept it.
Yeah. How I discovered that I was plural is when I first started trauma therapy, which of course, as a trauma survivor, and this is what happens, right? So often is we may know that we have experienced maybe say abuse or sexual abuse in our background, which is what I experienced, right? I put it in my past and moved on. That's what I hear all the time from my clients is it was in the past and I moved on. And what I didn't know at the time and what people don't know is that it lives in our bodies, right? And busyness is a coping strategy. And so when we start to not be, going at 150 miles an hour and we start to slow down, say our kids don't need us as much as they used to, or you're not doing 3 jobs at one time or whatever, you start to slow down, all of a sudden it like raises its head and demands that you work on it, right? So like I went from a very high functioning overachiever in my day job to not being able to function at all in the span of 2 weeks over Christmas break, right? And I was leading a really, really big project. I was leading the project and I couldn't function. My startle response was to the ceiling. I cried almost all day long. I could not get regulated. My regulation skills, my coping skills were inadequate, absolutely inadequate. And I felt very alone and I really couldn't function. And so I had to made the decision to put my big girl panties on and to pull them up and go talk to my manager. And this is how I staged the conversation. This is what happened, and I will understand if you need to get somebody else for this job. And she said to me, I have gotten exactly the right person for this job. How can I help? And that changed so much for me. And every time I tell that story, it sends chill bumps up my back because having someone to say, I don't know anything about trauma, but we can do it together. How can I help? And so we started on this journey together with someone who I had at work as support. And so as I got into therapy, started going to trauma therapy, I would come in the office and I would say, my head is really noisy. And she would like cock her head, kind of like a dog does with a high whistle. She would like cock her head and say, tell me more. And then write down. And I was like, I don't know what she's writing about. I was like, I don't know. And at times I really thought I was losing my mind because I did not know what was happening. But I just had all these voices and it was just so loud until she said to me, these are all parts of yourself. And I don't know, she explained some kind of roundtable thing where, all the parts that were talking, and they were just like all trying to talk all at one time. And it was so loud. It was absolutely so loud. And so I was like, okay, calm down. Like, I'm willing to, now that I'm here and I know you're there, like I'll listen, but like, I can only do one person at a time. Like one at a time. So that's how we got started. But that was like the previous host, right? When I found out I had DID, like my therapist didn't tell me I had DID. I told her that I thought I did. And she said, I've suspected it for a while, but I didn't think it was helpful for you to have one diagnosis on top of another diagnosis as where you were on your healing journey, which fair, right? I was already struggling with the, CPTSD stuff, which was fine because it allowed me time to own it and to own it for myself and to say, oh, I think I have this. But when I found out, I was in coaching training for doing group coaching and I cried for a week. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, I could not get regulated at all. I thought it was the end of the world. You're just gonna get regulated. But then I realized, okay, I'm just gonna do a little bit at a time. And our host was just really freaked out. Hearing this stuff, it's like, okay, I know who that is. But also when she started to like try to look inside, it was just so overwhelming. She would get so overwhelmed that she would leave the bus without a driver. It would leave the system in chaos because there wasn't like a leader. And then, we have certain parts that should not be in leadership. And in our current therapist, our previous therapist wasn't really trained in DID. Even though she was interested, she had a lot else on her plate that she couldn't, get around to get to the capacity to learn it. And so we were like, I think we need to do something else because I don't think we're going to get any further with our trauma because each part holds trauma. And we have to allow the healing at a parts level instead of at this global, let's just pick the, low hanging fruit. Like we got to dig a little bit deeper and allow each part to heal. And so that's when we started going to, and I don't even remember what the question is, to be honest.
Did I coming out of dinner? That's such a great system answer, right? Like, wait, what were we talking about? We all have opinions, but I have no idea what the question was. That's great. Yeah, but it was about, sort of the denial and coming out of denial and discovering and accepting that you're a system. And I actually really love that you named the fact that your therapist suspected it and was struggling with whether or not to basically share her suspicions with you, because I think that is super common on the therapy side of things. So this can be something that is life-changing in a very helpful way for people to know. But if you do it too soon, given all the stereotypes and stigma, and some people will call it a quote unquote big diagnosis, it can really make things go sideways or south in the therapy room. So there's always this, trying to check in with your clinical intuition of when can I let this person know? So a lot of times it's that gentle suggestion around parts as opposed to, so I think yours are like living in separate rooms and some of them don't know each other exists.
Yeah. I think she allowed me to lead. And that's what I loved about her, is that she went where I went. She let me work on the things that I wanted to work with. She met me where I was and allowed me to discover myself and then determine what I wanted to do. I love that about her. I love her. I was very close to her. She really helped me heal some really deep wounds when it came to attachment. I had such terrible attachment wounds. And I know most of us who have DID systems have terrible attachment wounds. but she was just present and available, right? Like I could text her just to like, she would go to town and we would not do well, right? But she would be available, and it was simple things like I would send her an emoji or I would send her some funny thing. Like it was just a connection thing. And I think what enabled us to be able to move forward with working on our system was the healing that we had on the attachment level, that we were able to let go of her, because there for a long time we just couldn't. Every time we tried to like take a break from therapy or like not we couldn't, like we just couldn't. And so we got to the point where we're like, oh, like the parts came to the decision that we could like take care of each other. Like there was that wise voice that says, you all need to take care of each other. And we're like, oh, well, we could do that, because we had some younger parts that needed, some older part to take care of them and to look out for them, because they were going to a new school. That's the way we looked at it. They were going to a new school, and it was different. It was like us graduating from elementary school and moving up to middle school, where you change classes all the time and they were only like 50 minutes long. And because our therapy sessions were 90 minutes and sometimes even longer. Our new therapist was 55 minutes and, once a week. She was very clear about that up front. And I thought, we had a meeting about that. And we talked about it. Like, what are the pros and cons about that? And going, the goal is for us to be able to continue to function in our daily lives and to be able to heal as well, too. And you have very limited capacity. And this is what I tell my folks, right? The coaching folks is you have limited capacity. Career development can coexist, but you have limited capacity. So what's the amount of percentage of your capacity are you willing to dedicate to healing? And the one you're going to dedicate to career and all the other things in your cup that takes up space. Like, what is that, right? The little mini bites of therapy that we get during the week is enough to allow us to continue to have two jobs, to serve and to coach people who are really struggling, right? Like, we're just not all in our stuff. It's not all about us, right? We still have the capacity to help others and to coach and to facilitate healing. And that was really important. So we were like, yeah, okay, I think this is going to work for us, but we still had littles that were really very attached to the other therapists. And so we had to like kind of, let them know, well, we can still see her every once in a while. We can, send her a text every once in a while, let her know we're still here. Or if you have a breakthrough, we can send her a little, gold star or whatever. When we have success and breakthroughs in therapy, she loves hearing about that. So, and it was really hard at the beginning when we were doing the intake and trying to decide what we're going to do. It took us some time to get okay with that and to say, okay, we know we need to move forward, because we've got some work we have to do, and we've got some parts that are really wanting to do the work. So, yeah.
You lined that up really well for folks, and I'm just going to backtrack a little bit to highlight a few things that feel really important. When we have these parts that can begin to get attached to our therapists as we're working out attachment wounds, and we have parts in our system that don't even have object constancy, when they can't see her or her or him, whoever it is, that person kind of literally disappears off the face of the earth, and it creates a lot of turmoil and a lot of despair. What was really beautiful that you delineated was the type of contact that can be really helpful. When you said sometimes we could just send her an emoji and she might respond, maybe however she responded, probably I'm assuming briefly, allowed your system to kind of exhale a little bit. Oh, she's still there. We're
yes,
still connected.
it was exactly that.
That can be so important. And when you get that contact, it can be a sentence or two, emojis back, or whatever it might be. Multiple parts of the system can revisit that throughout the day or the week.
And I think sometimes there are therapists that are really reluctant to work with systems because they hear you need to be available outside of the therapy hour. And a lot of them think, I don't want to do that. Like, I need to have a life. I have my own family, my own kids. I think everybody thinks it's a crisis all the time. And it's really not. It can be these very brief contacts that just really are sustaining for the system. What I'm wondering about, and I wonder if you could talk a little more about this next thing, is I know that folks get stuck sometimes in that place where their littles or parts of their system continue to feel dependent on the therapist, and they don't necessarily get to the place that you got to particularly quickly, which is, wait a minute, we have all of these internal resources. We can actually help each other. So we can
Yeah.
still have our relationship with our therapist and we can move forward in healing. And in between, we actually can rely on each other. Can you talk a little bit in more depth about how you got there? Because people will get stuck on, we or I have been taking care of ourselves for our entire life. Like, I don't want to do it. I want somebody else, and it's sometimes there's
Yeah.
heels that get dug in. And how did you get to that place where you were like, this is okay. We have this contact, this connection, and we can learn how to support ourselves internally.
Yeah, it's a really great question. So I'm thinking back to where we were and what we were going through at the time because it was really painful. That separation was really painful, especially for the littles. But positioning it as, hey, guess what? You're moving to another classroom. You're moving up. And oh, by the way, all you other ones who have already moved up, you know how hard it was to move up the first time. So you should have some compassion. You should help them because you know how hard it was. And that was sort of how we kind of coached the rest of the system to come alongside and to say, she was such a great teacher for such a long time, and we will always love her, and she will always be in our memories. And, we'll always be able to like remember back, and we can always look at the texts that we have, and you'll always be able to have her. She'll always be yours. But also, she wants you to be able to move forward in the class and to continue to learn. And that's sort of how we positioned it with the littles because it was their ability to kind of move forward into the next class.
There's a really great analogy when you think about being a kid and being in school, and you can have teachers that you get really attached to.
Yeah.
And first grade does end, and you do go to second grade with a new
Yeah.
teacher, typically,
Yeah.
somebody else that you may form attachments with. Invariably, I also know that there are systems listening who are probably thinking, well, they could do that because they're having internal conversations, potentially. Do you also receive communication from your parts that is not necessarily verbal conversations in the headspace?
Yes, I do.
I
Uh,
mean, I do as well. And I think sometimes there are people who discount that as communication, but I think it's important. Like some of the physical sensations that we get, some of the just images that might pop into our head, memories that
yeah.
might come up can also be really important pieces of communication. And
Yeah.
sometimes you have to think about how to decode those when they come up, but it's bona fide communication.
Yeah, it's one thing that my new therapist has really been teaching us a lot is how to notice. Like noticing is a big deal.
Yes.
And like how to notice, well, like when we had this pain in our eye, when we're processing something, had this pain in our eye, and she said to us, like, what is that telling you? And like the part like knew exactly what that was saying. I'm not going to get into detail, but like that part knew exactly what the body was saying in that part, but be like noticing the shift because a lot of us are still very detached to our bodies, right? And we were at one point, yeah, we're from the neck up, a checkup from the neck up.
Yep. Oh,
But
yeah.
like I'm still working on that, right? I was at one time more dissociated from my like body. My body was an outcast, right?
Mhm.
And so we've done a lot of work already to bring the body back in, but the body's got a lot of she's got a lot of stuff to work through. Let's just put it that way, right? So
Yeah.
to coming in and just being able to listen and notice with compassion and not judgment, it's just really all that, you just
learning to pay attention to those things and to pay attention to, like, there are certain times, and I don't know if this happens to you, it probably does. Like, there are certain parts that cannot pray, that cannot write, that cannot talk. There are certain times when I do sense like a sobbing in my soul, and I don't know who it is, right? I know it's a little, right? But like those things, I'm like, okay, so I'm speaking back into the system, or I'm writing back into the system, and I'm saying, I hear you. I got you. You're not alone. I'm here. And you're doing all the, nurturing that part needs. But to know, again, it comes down to individuality and understanding the capabilities of each part. Some parts are so young. Some parts are like in utero parts, right? And they don't have any verbal, right? It's just that, I don't know, ESP or whatever. I don't know.
For real, and even parts that are older can be completely nonverbal because they've been threatened into silence in different ways, right? So they can't speak. And sometimes the
Yes.
communication may be through drawing, it might be through like just typing or writing, but there's no ability to hear them or to negotiate verbally. Sometimes you do get sort of like thought transfer or like downloads. There's so many different ways that you can get information, and it's all valid, but you also, I think, have to be open, right? To, like you said, noticing that it's there to begin with, and then being curious about it with hopefully a sense of loving compassion rather than the kind of rejection that I think sometimes is based in a very understandable fear.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to know.
Yeah. A lot of times we'll just ask into the system. Does anybody have any more information? Because I am not connected, or there's a barrier between, me and another part. But that whole, that was our former host was that way. She was like, I don't want to know, or I can't. Like her window of tolerance was so small for system things. And so, she was willing to step down and to turn over the management of system life to me, who was the scribe, right? And I love it. I'm learning. I never was intended to be a leader. I was just the writer, right? But I'm learning how to lead, and learning how. She was really famous for, and I don't know if this happens to you, she was really famous for overcommitting and then getting overwhelmed and then leaving the system and just like leaving. And the system is like, what the hell? She did it again. Like, now we've got to figure out how to get this done without her. And it was not good. It was, so, her leaving the leadership team was like, phew. I mean, she's on the leadership team, but she's, what do we call it? Emeritus. She's the leader emeritus.
I'm here to occasionally advise, even though I struggle with the commitment part.
Exactly.
Yeah. My system doesn't actually have a leader. I sometimes jokingly refer to it as functional anarchy because somehow it always works out. Or, the game, The Hungry Hippos, where like a part comes forward, does what it knows how to do, slides back so another part can come forward. That's how we've always worked. But it leads to similar issues that you describe, because you can have multiple parts committing to do things and you still only have one body to get that stuff done through. Yeah. Although I do find energy levels sometimes can be easier in a system when you have different parts taking over that bring new energy. So I assume sometimes less fatigue than if there was a single.
Yeah. Well, see, she would never talk to the leadership team and get their agreements. That was the thing. She just said yes. And I think that's something that we have to learn as systems is like, you're not one person.
Yep.
You're a system of parts, and it takes consensus. So like, for example, like coaching someone who's a system is a whole different ball game, right? An individual coaching session to a group coaching session, and there's not one person making the decision. And also the abilities and talents and abilities are the sum total of all the parts. And you may
Yeah.
not know what all the parts are, right?
Yes.
And so they're just trying to figure out, who the heck am I? And
Yeah.
what am I good at? And what do I want to do? Or it's not just what do I want to do? It's like, what should we do? Or what do we want to do? Or what can we agree to do?
That's pivotal though, right? Because whoever is fronting, whether you have a host or you don't, you're always going to have parts that are fronting. Having them understand that they're no more or less important than other parts in the system is literally
Yes.
pivotal.
It's so, so important to like the smallest part. It's like a body, right? And the smallest part of the body is usually the most important. And you're only as strong as your weakest link, so to speak. So you have to move together corporately as a team. And how are we going to do that? You have to just work differently. You just have to like have a discussion and everybody gets a voice at the table. Right. And
Yeah.
so let's figure out, how do we come to consensus? When I was in my undergrad, I had a counseling course that the teacher was teaching us without teaching us how to come to a consensus. We had to figure it out. He didn't teach us how to do that. It was so frustrating. We're just used to like whatever. But also, I think my system really needed to know that. Like, I don't know. There are certain things that I know how to do that I didn't know how I knew how to do them. I just knew. Or I was a system, right? I was really good at systems thinking. Can you believe that? I was
Yes.
really good at organizational structure. I was good at gaining consensus from people. I was good at connecting dots. Like, I believe trauma survivors have superpowers. That is the premise of my whole company, is we have superpowers. And so like, I didn't know, but I knew how to do certain things that I didn't know how I knew how to do that. I just knew. And I was like, oh, this really totally makes sense right now. I'm like, oh, now I get it, because the system was doing what the system does. And I was like, oh, and it's really valuable, by the way, in corporate America. I'm just saying.
Mhm.
It's a valued
Yeah.
skill.
So speaking about corporate America and any business, any job, what do you wish that maybe more employers or coworkers really understood about working with somebody who's a trauma survivor or somebody that's plural? Because we're
Yeah.
bringing in what the system can do, which we can get more into in a moment. But I'm curious, what do you feel is missing on the employer side of things? Because nobody knows this stuff.
Yeah. I think the statistics now are 78% of people have experienced some kind of trauma in their lifetime. And they don't understand it, right? And they don't understand, especially those who have experienced childhood trauma, and how it fundamentally changes and rewires your brain and developmentally, in how it shows up, it continues to show up in the workplace. Like, I don't think that they understand that and how to work with it. When we talk about being trauma informed, it's like acknowledging the behaviors of trauma. They don't even know what to look for. They don't teach us in leadership training. But you've got leaders who are managing trauma survivors who are being triggered by power differentials in the workplace, and are really good employees and are really good at what they do, but the environment triggers them, so it makes them totally incapable. And they don't know how to do it. Or you have trauma survivors who are newly managers, and now they have to figure out, and this was not so good for me when so like, what am I going to do with this now? How do I operate? You got them from both. And I don't think, so when I start to point out saying, okay, if you're seeing this might be what's coming up for them. And even the folks themselves are like, oh, I didn't know that that's what that was. And I'm like, yeah, it gives it validity, and it's like, oh, that's what that is. And oh, by the way, you don't have to be stuck with it. Triggers are information. That's what triggers are. They're just information about when you do this is how I explain it. So this is for all those psychological folks out there. This is just the way I'm going to explain it, right? Triggers, because I work in technology, is like doing a Google search. You type in the search criteria, that's the trigger, and then you have a whole bunch of records that come up, right? That's the trigger response. And so because you have so many records come up, the more records you have, the more intense the trigger. That's how I explain it. So when you do that search, and you could say, oh, when I did this in the workplace, and I have a workplace trigger tracker that I'll give you the link. It's free for everybody. It's just to create awareness of when they have triggers in the workplace. And then like, okay, in this situation, this is where it was, and this is what happened, and this is how I felt, and this was the intensity of it. And right. And then this is the coping strategy I'm aligning to it to help me get through it and get grounded and regulated. But you take that list of triggers and you take it to therapy. Because coaches don't process your past. They don't. They just help you in the present, right? And so you take that in partnership to your therapist and say, oh, we need to work on these things because these things keep coming up. Once you drain all of that, the all of the records, you reduce the file size, because that's what a traumatic memory is, a file size with all kinds of different information in it that is too much for the nervous system to process. Right. Of course, this is me technology, right? This is how I talk about it. It's just too much to process, and then it fragments. And the fragments, types of data go everywhere. You can have your procedural data, and you can have your physical data, and you can have the situational data. Like all kinds of that situation come together to form one memory. Right. And when you got them all out there, then they're not together, you can't process them. So that's what shows up in the body. That's how I explain it, because the psychobabble is just really difficult for people to understand.
What are you saying?
I mean, I'm just saying. That's how I explain it. Like, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. I'm not like a psychologist. I'm just, I'm the sports staff.
It's amazing. Well, I mean, going along with that, you talk a lot about being trauma-wise and career building, right?
Yeah.
We hear that if folks are listening to your podcast or reading your writing, that terminology comes up a fair amount. So when you think about that, what does that mean to you, and how do people understand that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It really is a great question, because I use that term a lot, but also I had to really sit with it for a little while to say, really, what does it mean? Right. And fundamentally, there are certain things, right, that it means. Like your nervous system is part of your career strategy. You have to account for your nervous system. That's what traditional approaches to career development do not account for, is your nervous system, right? Because you can't learn if you're not regulated.
That's so true.
Right? Right? And you only have certain amount of capacity. And sometimes we send people, we're like, oh, this employee has a problem, we'll send them to therapy. We've got great benefits. But what they don't account for is that it takes a lot of energy, their capacity to heal. So you got the pre-therapy, stress, you got the therapy stress, you got the 3 days post-processing stress. That all consumes your capacity. So they don't understand, well, why aren't they getting better? Because they're only at 20% of their workload, their capacity, because they got 80% that they're working on trauma recovery, right? We have to account for the nervous system as part of your career strategy. The second thing is like your healing developed real professional skills. Like hypervigilance is a really good skill to have. And people pleasing, right? But all these things, like your hypervigilance, it makes you really great at risk detection. Like, and we can read a room like nobody's business. We are really great BS detectors.
That's true.
Right? Because we can walk into a room and within 2 seconds, we can tell who hasn't slept, who's had a fight with their spouse, who is having a really bad day, right? Who just ate and now is like in the doldrums and wants to go take a nap. Like we can understand that within 5 seconds because we have that neuroception. And so like that hypervigilance that, you try to fix, when you channel that appropriately, like that's risk assessment. You can use that. You can use that skill. There's a lot of different skills. So it's really developed a lot of professional skills that we can tap into as trauma survivors that, you know, you got to flip the switch. You got to flip the script, right? This is not something that is detrimental to you. It's something that these other people don't have.
Yeah. So to clarify for people who might get confused, you're not talking about channeling that while you're in the midst of your own fight flight response to a trigger.
No.
You're talking about channeling the hypersensitivity to be able to read the room, that neuroception that works literally with
Yes.
a fine-tooth comb as it is taking observations of the room.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you have to be grounded to do it. Because if you're in survival mode, right? If you're triggered and you're in survival mode, none of this matters because you're just there to survive, right? You're just that's
Yeah.
not going to work, right? So that's why we have that. That's why we set the foundation of regulation. It is always the base is regulation. And that's the first that's where I start with all my folks is regulation. You have to know when you're triggered, why you're triggered, and how to get yourself back because you're not going to stop being triggered. It's going to be less intense and you're going to know how to handle it when it happens.
You're really underscoring the importance of that skill of being aware and being able to self-reflect and observe yourself. That
Yes.
without that skill, you can't do any of this stuff,
Yes.
right?
But you can have trusted others say, hey, I'm noticing.
Fair point.
I'm noticing but you would only share that with someone you really trusted. And, you know, it's for trauma survivors, it's really difficult to build that trust. But if you had somebody, a coaching friend or whatever, that was observing your behavior in the workplace and saying, you know, I'm noticing you seem a little bit off lately. Right. And they can help you create that awareness of what's happening for you.
And you can potentially unpack that with your coach or your therapist, depending on what the situation is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
I think that there are people in systems that are so used to quote unquote sucking it up. Like you can get very uncomfortable and you just keep moving forward because that's how you lived your life. And really being able to slow down and bring that stuff into your coach or your therapist can be really life-changing. Because when you develop that self-awareness and selves-awareness and selves reflection, that's when you can mobilize a lot of the stuff that you're talking about in a way that's really beneficial.
Yeah. And we're talking about real change here. We're talking about, I call it cutting trail. We're building new neural networks, right?
Love that.
We're cutting trail. And it is hard work. And it is sweat equity, right? But it's so easy to go down that well-worn path. But that's not getting us to the destination that we want to go to. So we got to cut new trail, and that is hard, right? And that's why we need that support. So the next thing is safety isn't optional for trauma survivors. It is foundational. And it's not like we're going to feel 100% safe in the workplace, but we have to define what's safe enough. Is it safe enough to operate? Is it safe enough to show up? And how can I protect myself or set boundaries on what feels safe? It's not optional at all. It's imperative to get people to say, well, get comfortable with discomfort. They tell you, get comfortable with discomfort now, or fake it till you make it. That's never good, right?
And they're done that, got the whole wardrobe, not just the t-shirt.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But everything is based upon a foundation of safety. And when you have sustainable success, that's what you build that foundation on. And then the next thing is, and this is so, so important, is your timeline is yours, right? It's your timeline. And when people come to me, I say, look, there's no rush. Healing from trauma takes time. And trauma survivors have about this much capacity to learn when they're trying to heal. And you have to be grounded, right? And so it's taking small bites. It's taking bites that you consume, just like in my therapy when I went from 90 minutes to 55 minutes. It's taking those consumable bites that you can absorb for a little bit, and then they're easily digestible, right? You don't have to meet somebody else's timeline.
Yeah.
Right? Your trauma recovery isn't linear, and neither is trauma-wise career building. It's not linear, right? There's no shoulds about how you should do it. Right? Everybody's journey is their own, just like system life. Like I've heard you say millions of times, you've met one system, right? It's the same with trauma survivors in their career because everybody's journey is different. And as a coach, it's my privilege to meet people just where they are and come alongside them and just say, hey, I'm with you. You're not in this alone. We're here together and we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out together, right? That feels different than me bossing them around and telling them what to do, because that's not going to work. Right? So it's built on, when I say trauma wise, it's built on 3 pillars. One is regulation before growth. The second one is wholeness, not performance. And the third one is authentic advancement. And when I say authentic advancement, trauma-wise career building isn't climbing someone else's ladder. It's not climbing somebody else's ladder. It's about defining success on your own terms that honor both your ambitions and your healing needs. So it's a balance, right? And you're doing you, right? And so you don't have to worry about anybody else. And I think that's really understanding that concept alone is what is infused into my coaching business. Because, I went and did the whole certification thing and got certified as a trauma recovery coach and all the things. And then the certifying agency imploded. But I was like, why do I need somebody else's permission to tell me that I can do this? Like nobody else is talking about it. So why do I need somebody else who hasn't been talking about it and doesn't know squat to tell me that I have permission to do this, or I'm certified? That makes no sense. And so like I have a tendency to tune out the noise around, what this certifying agency and who this expert is and who, I'm not trying to fit in. I'm really not trying to fit into, the in-group when it comes to trauma. I'll kind of do my own thing.
That's so much growth and healing, because when you think about it as a trauma survivor, one of the things that we tend to do is try to fit into all of the boxes in order to stay safe. I need to follow the rules. I need to walk on the eggshells. I need to walk the straight line, or something bad might happen. Yeah. So how liberating to get to that place where, in a way, what you're saying is, I trust myself to find the path that's correct for me, and I know we'll be okay.
Yeah. And listen, I haven't arrived, right? I don't think I've arrived, right? And I tell people, look, I'm a trauma survivor and I'm learning. And that's how I will show up ugly. I will show up messy in therapy or in coaching. I will show up, but I will show up, right? And a lot of the most powerful things that I do is to lead by example, is to say, okay, I'm messy right now and I'm working through some things, but let you watch me work through this thing. Or let me set the example of self-care. I can't tend that right now because I'm been activated and I need to do what I need to do in order to, get regulated. Right. And my folks are very supportive of that. They're like, thank you for setting the example for us of what we need to do. In the beginning of my coaching membership, I was so over, I have a tendency, well, let me reframe. My former host had a tendency to overfunction in a really big way. It would be bad because we wouldn't sleep. We'd be very dysregulated. It was messy. It was not good. We had to step away for 3 weeks and leave our coaching membership program in the hands of some coaches that I trusted. And, they were familiar with my folks to handle that for 3 weeks. I had to step away to get myself back and to heal and get myself back centered again, because that's how long it took me to do it. But I had to do it. I told them what was happening. I didn't I wasn't embarrassed that I had to do that. It was like, look, this is what happens, right? This is just, we just normalized it and say, this is what happens when you overcommit and you overfunction. And then you have to like take care of yourself. And this is what these are some of the options, and this is what you could do. And this is what I'm going to do. And so by stepping into that and really demonstrating how do you do that is really an important object lesson for your folks. So like if you're a therapist or you're a coach and you've had struggles, and don't be afraid to share that. Like don't be afraid to share that, because it's helpful for people to understand that you're human and that you struggle too, and that, we all struggle. We all struggle, right? It's just part of life.
Yeah. You can see my wheels turning because as a therapist, right, there are
Yeah.
just boundaries where you can't share a certain amount of things. It wouldn't be
Right.
okay because you don't want your clients worried about you or what you
Right.
might be going through. But certainly there are ways in which you can self-disclose that are really appropriate, that help people know that you can navigate some really challenging things and come out okay on the other side.
Yeah.
I think authenticity in the relationship is really important because the relationship truly is a partnership, whether it's a coaching relationship or a therapy relationship. And the relationship itself is ultimately the vehicle for healing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, listen, a lot of times you wouldn't share with them. What do they call it? The scab or the scar, right? I think I've heard that analogy, right? It's the scab or the scar.
There's a lot of folks who will say, when you're going through something and there's an active wound, that is not the time to you don't speak from the wound, speak actually from the scar once it's healed over. But
Yeah.
there are ways in which you can appropriately self-disclose.
And I don't do much of that. Like, so when I'm in the middle of it, I don't tell them what's going. I mean, I just said, I'm not well, I need to step away, or I'm over functioning and I need to fix it. It's high level. They don't need to know that.
Yeah, the high level stuff I think can be incredibly, like you said, you can role model for people how to take care of yourself. That also ultimately helps them do the same. So it's without the details, right? But it can be, maybe you're overextended, maybe you're not feeling well in any capacity. And I need to take a couple steps back, recalibrate, I'll be back on X date or whatever.
Yeah.
And in the interim, these are the things that I have in place for you to make sure that you're okay as well.
Definitely. Because you still want to take care of your folks, right? You still have responsibility for them, right?
Yeah.
For sure.
And which also helps the relationship, especially for folks who have attachment issues, right? I'm not going to abandon you because something might have come up in my life, whether that's a physical illness or an emotional situation or whatever. I have thought about your care, and these are the things that are in place for you to leverage, utilize, access in the brief period of time that I might be taking care of whatever came up. Right? Yeah, I like that. And those are actually some really great examples for people who might be thinking about, so what do you do for your system to support yourself through triggers and transitions? I think what you just said speaks to that a bit.
Yeah, it's so really important to take care of yourself, right?
Do you have for your system like specific either orienting, grounding, comforting types of skills that you employ on a regular basis, or?
Yeah, I have a daily presencing practice. So I have found it to be very beneficial in really showing up present in the workplace. So, I have a routine in the morning. When we do certain things like we'll journal or go for a walk or listen to music or certain things like that can help. Now, there are times when some things come up, like I have a home office. I have a medical accommodation where I can work from home. That way I can manage my symptoms when they come up better. But in my office, I have a rocking chair with a nice, soft, comfy blanket and a teddy bear that I can rock in. And that's really soothing for some of those littles. Just that ability to rock. Like going to my new therapist has been teaching us so many things about how to get present in a room and to look around at the different things and how much color and like it. And I weave those presencing practices into all the things that I'm teaching the folks in my membership, my coaching program. Like, okay, let's take let's breathe. It's really important to, have like I love vagus nerve breathing, like just to activate the vagus nerve, just to go, and just like I will have people do that all the time, even on calls, even at work, because you're seeing people and they're like, and you're like, okay, I just want you to breathe real in and just exhale out, but make a sound. Like, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, I feel so much better. I'm like, isn't that amazing?
Yeah. Those things are so helpful. You can have parts of a system that can be really, well, we'll go with the parts of the system that might be reluctant to use orienting, grounding, or present types of skills because they feel like we're brushing over their pain or we're somehow saying that what they experienced wasn't important. However, the reality is we do live in the present moment and we probably don't want to lose our entire presence to the past. So we can create spaces for those parts to be seen, heard, and held while still having our feet in the day-to-day present moment kinds of things where we're still creating a life for ourselves.
Yeah, I so totally agree with that. And listen, what I've learned about my system is they just want to be acknowledged.
Yeah.
Like and this is where the community journal comes in, right? Is for everybody to have a voice and to just acknowledge and to say, okay, I hear you. I got you. I acknowledge this. But also we have this really important meeting that we have to go to right now. So I'm going to ask if you will put that in this box for right now. And I promise you we'll come back to it. Right. And that does well because it addresses saying, yes, I acknowledge that there's this here and I'm going to create some space for us to process it in the journal and to come and then be able to function in day to day.
Yes.
Right. But sometimes you have to get really creative with these littles, like, especially if you have to go away for business on 3 days. This happened to me where my littles hid my hotel key for my room. And I knew I just had it. And I was like, where is that? And I could hear them giggling. I knew they were playing a trick on me and I could hear them giggling. And I was like, okay, very funny. But also, if I don't go to work, then I can't come back and we can't play. And so they're like, okay, fine. But I was like, that was really very funny. But, you have to be creative. And if you're going into a big meeting, you don't really want the littles hanging out in the boardroom, right? Or wherever you're at. You need to let them play in the backyard and have creative babysitting strategies.
Yeah. Build really great sections of your inner world for that kind of thing for the littles because the sky's the limit. And it's really fun to make those suggestions to them when you need to be otherwise focused and engaged, shall we say, in more adult-like activities.
Yes, very fun. I have a lot of fun with my system often. There are some heavier parts, right?
Sure.
And let me just, put that out there. It's not all rainbows and unicorns, but, I really just enjoy them. Well, most of them. Let me just be totally honest.
That's really funny. Also relatable. There are all these little ways in which, parts of your system can show up that are so incredibly amusing, whether it's the comments from behind the scenes, shall we say, that pop up at these unexpected moments that you're trying not to laugh in the context of a very serious business meeting, or, there's so many different ways. And I think we should acknowledge the fact that there can be some really challenging parts of a system that can be heavy and dark and scary, and we can still enjoy other parts of our system while we're trying to figure out how we're working with those harder parts.
And those are the wounded parts, right? So have a lot of compassion for them because they've been carrying a lot of heavy weight for a really long time, right? And they're just doing the best that they can. But we're also in a good place with a great supportive therapist,
That reassurance can make all the difference, because some parts have been feeling like, but I've been waiting for 50 years, literally.
100%, yeah.
And it's hard to say, and I need you to wait a little longer, but it can be true.
Yeah.
Right? That you can't attend to everybody all at the same time. It's really not possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or certainly not possible to do it and still function.
That true. Too. Yeah.
It sounds like you have a great relationship with your therapist where you guys can all show up very authentically as yourselves. So different parts can come forward and talk with her. There are a number of people who really struggle with that. They feel embarrassed or shameful, or like it's hard to put this feeling into words, but it can feel really disorienting for people and they're kind of mortified by the process. What sort of words of wisdom do you have for those folks? Because really, like, that's the place where progress really starts to take off, is when those parts can freely come forward.
I've been thinking about our transition to our new therapist, and to get system consensus that we were all willing to work on the system. And it's hard. Like, we had a host who got very overwhelmed by system stuff and left the system in very precarious situations, without, leaderless, and brought a lot of chaos. And so it's really understanding or committing to having each other's back. If you say within the system and say, whatever we are going to do, we're going to get through this together. But I understand how overwhelmed the initial host, like, I've been thinking about this a lot and how it's almost a comedy if you think about it. I'm looking at our former host and like the system is like, come on, like, let's get with the program, right? And the host is like, and like they would only like this whole, it was not a like, oh, we're just going to come out now. It was years and years in planning that the system planned to like give her little glimpses of this is what happened, like inner child work. Oh, we thought we were really losing our mind then, right? But then it was like little bits of pieces, and they were like, okay, well, that was enough for her then. Like, we need to just back off for a little bit. And then they give a little bit more, and they're like, hello, we're here. And it takes a long time for that host to become aware, because we're really good at masking. The system is excellent in masking, second to none, right? And so they mask from the host. And so if you're someone who's new to DID, just be so compassionate and graceful with yourself. Like, that's my recommendation, is like, you've been a system a long time. This doesn't form like usually in adulthood. It usually forms into childhood, right? And so your system has been around for a really long time. You're just new to it. So there's a lot to learn, and you may freak out, but like, just ask your system to be gentle with you, to not give you more than you can handle until you can kind of get up to speed on it's a lot. Like, when I have a part that lived in 1986 and I brought him to 2025, right? That, like, your brain would explode, right? This is what's happening for a new host, is like, oh, they didn't know what was happening all this time. They're just now learning it and learning to so like, be gentle with yourself and have a lot of compassion, and know that this is just a progress. It's just a process, and go slow. And it's okay. It's okay not to do all the things that all the other DID systems are talking about. It's okay to like, question, is this normal, or am I making this up? Because I ask that a lot to my therapist. Am I just making this up? Right there, but there's a logic to it. There's a function to everything that happens within your system, and like, just appreciate that they got you through something that was really difficult, and they're really good at it, and they just want you on board. That's what they want. They want you to be part of them. And that they were waiting to pull you in. And now they're recruiting you. Really, they're recruiting you into the system. But you have, like, you're recruited as the leader, and now you have this new corporate CEO role that you have to learn how to lead differently. You're not just a single person that can make decisions and without any repercussions. It's just you. Now you have to learn how to lead a group of people, a group of parts, right? And it's a different operating model.
Yeah.
right? And so like you're learning. So just like what Dr. Kennedy talks about, the learning zone. I love what she had said. She said the learning zone is the difference between what you don't know and what you do know. And that in between those 2 points is really uncomfortable. But the longer that you can stay in the discomfort, the more you learn, right? And so as a host, you're learning and it's uncomfortable, right? But know that you're just learning, and just tell yourself you're just learning. You're gonna make mistakes, but that's okay because you're just learning,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Sometimes we feel like the whole, are we just making this up? It can be so protective, because
Yeah.
it can feel really scary. And if you're in that space of being really vulnerable with somebody and sharing to that degree, or really vulnerable parts are coming forward, there can be fear that those parts are going to be rejected. And sometimes that, am I just making this up, or are we just making this up, forms this kind of protective wall around you. And yet it's also the thing that tends to keep us most stuck.
I mean, we are learning to unmask and to be comfortable. Like for me, we got really comfortable unmasking in the therapy room really quickly, which was surprising. I didn't think that was going to happen, but we got really comfortable really quick. And I think it was because the way that she organized the sessions, and it was methodical, like she showed up on time. There were certain procedures that she did every single time, made us really feel comfortable. And because we already knew that she was going to be our therapist, like it was a God thing, like we were like, oh, well, she's our person. Like there's no doubt here. Like she's our person. Right. But learning how to, like, realizing for the first time that we have a place where we can unmask and be, just be. And everything was okay. And it was all good. And so I think part of that is part of this challenge, right, is to get 100% comfortable unmasking all the way, to allow the parts to express or to be or to show up however they are,
Yeah.
right?
Are there things that you would recommend that therapists could say or do specifically that can help systems that are kind of reluctant to be authentic in sessions to be more authentic?
I think meeting the person where they are and going as slow as they need to go is super helpful, and allowing them to walk at their own pace and come however they need to show it, and create that safe space that allows them to show up however they show up, and it's okay. And creating this acceptance, unconditional acceptance for all the parts. Because that's one thing my therapist does so well. When she notices that there's a new part, she'll just introduce herself to the part and tell what her role is. She's the systems counselor, and you're part of a system of parts. And it's very comforting. Then the rest of the parts on the inside are like, she's our therapist. They're all saying that from the inside. Like, it's not just her therapist, it's our therapist, you know?
Yeah.
You know?
That's so important if you're a therapist and you're listening, or any provider really, and listening, understanding that it's really an honor to meet different parts in a system, both an honor and a blessing. And if the more you can reflect back that you are honored and that you do accept all parts, however they show up, the more likely the system is to be most comfortable in being as authentic as possible. And you might have to repeat that multiple times. But you've hit on so many important things like consistency, showing up at a certain time, starting on time, being a safe person or a safe enough person. What does that mean? What does that look like? So, loving acceptance, compassion, and openness. And understanding, yeah, you can only move as fast as the slowest part, and still sometimes those slowest parts still need little nudges
Yeah.
to help
Yeah.
people move forward.
Yeah. I think the parts will allow themselves to be seen when they trust you. So it may take a while. Some people have been hurt repeatedly, even by therapists. So
Yep.
especially if you are a therapist who has someone in your office who's been wounded by a therapist, that person is going to have some baggage that they have to work through in order to get to the point where they can actually trust you. And it's not your fault. It's their burden that you'll have the privilege to help them work through.
That's beautiful. Is there a message that you would like to send to systems who are listening and they're still trying to find their way?
Yeah. Well, because I deal more with careers, right? This career coaching piece for DID, I have just scratched the surface of. I would love to get into a room with systems and just have a listening session of like, where are all the things that you struggle with or that you're exceptional about? Because I really do believe that trauma survivors are exceptional and they have exceptional talents, that they have superpowers. I strongly believe that. But to hear where they struggle and to know that you don't have to do it alone, you're not alone in this, right? That there are other people who struggle just like you, but you've already done the hard part. You've survived the hardest part, right? Yeah, continuing to move forward is really putting the past in its place and being able to shine. And that's, to me, that is the reward of the work, is when I can see a system or a trauma survivor step into their strength and their ability and who they are and come in confidence and see them, watch them shine and step into their power. There's like, what do you, therapist confetti? We coaches must have confetti too. There's this joy that that's the reward beyond the payment, right? I mean, that's my goal. I'm invested in their success. It's not about making money and building empires. I'm invested in their success, and they're going to invest in somebody else's success, and so on, right? And that's how we help each other. That's how we come alongside each other and strengthen one another.
That's true community, like a true supportive community.
Yeah.
Where can people find you?
Well, they could find me on my website, cyndibennettconsulting.com. And it's CYNDI. So I'll give that in the show notes. But also, I have a podcast. The podcast is Trauma Wise Career Guide. There we go. Thank you very much. You can find me on medium.com. My blogs are out there as well. So also, I am on the advisory board of the CPTSD Foundation. So you may see my blogs over there as well. I support them. So they're great folks over there. And I'm pretty sure there's some systems over there as well that haven't found us yet.
That's awesome. We'll make sure we link all of this in show notes so people can just click
Awesome.
and find you pretty easily. Thank you guys so much for doing this with
It was
us today.
such a
This has been
privilege.
so fun.
It's been a privilege. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
And to everyone listening, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. There were so many great takeaways, whether you're a system supporter or provider. If you found value in today's conversation, please share it with other people who might benefit. And don't forget to check out our Substack at healingmyparts.substack.com, which is a weekly blog, many of which come with downloadables that can be used if you're a system for your own healing. If you're a therapist, you can use it with your own clients. And please check out our services from consults to groups at healingmyparts.org. Until next time, let's keep healing. Thank you for tuning in. You can find our blog on Substack at healingmyparts.substack.com and on Instagram at healingmyparts.
Just a disclaimer, any information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for professional therapy or behavioral health care. Nor does listening to the podcast constitute a therapist-client relationship. Please be sure to take extra good care of you. And until next time, keep healing and thriving.